first time Caleb Mercer saw his mail-order bride, she was standing alone beside the stagecoach with a carpet-bag clutched tight against her ribs, staring at the wooden sign that read Silver Creek like it was written in a foreign tongue. And truth be told, it might as well have been, because the girl couldn't read a single word of it. And Caleb knew that before he ever tipped his hat, because her letter had not been written in her own hand, but by a preacher back in St. Louis who said she was honest, hard-working, and eager for a good Christian home, but never once mentioned the quiet shame she carried in her eyes when words gathered like storm clouds before her. Silver Creek was the kind of town that judged quick and forgave slow, built from dust, sweat, and stubbornness, where the wind pushed grit under doors and gossip through walls. And as Caleb walked toward her, boots steady against the wooden boards of the platform, he felt every pair of eyes watching from the saloon porch, from the mercantile window, from behind lace curtains in the boarding house upstairs, because a mail-order bride was a spectacle, and a rancher past 30 who'd never taken a wife was a mystery folks liked to solve with whispers. Her name was Annabelle, small and soft-spoken, with brown hair pinned too tight, and hands rough from work that didn't match the delicate blue ribbon at her collar. And when Caleb introduced himself, voice low and careful, she smiled polite but nervous, glancing again at that town sign like she wished she understood it. And he saw the flicker of confusion cross her face when the driver handed her a receipt and pointed where to sign, her fingers hovering over the paper, trembling like a colt, unsure of its legs. Caleb stepped forward without a word, took the pencil gently from her hand, and signed his own name bold and certain, telling the driver he'd handle it. And Anna's cheeks flushed red as sunset, because she knew he'd noticed. And in that silent exchange between them lay a truth heavier than any trunk on that coach. She could cook, sew, mend, pray, and work from dawn till dark, but she could not read the Bible she carried, nor the letters she might one day write. The ride out to Mercer Ranch stretched long beneath a sky wide as forgiveness, sagebrush bending under the afternoon wind, cattle lowing in distant pastures, and Anna sat stiff beside him in the wagon, hands folded tight in her lap, stealing glances at the passing land like she was memorizing it by sight alone, because words could not hold it for her. And Caleb found himself wanting to describe everything aloud: the creek bend, the ridgeline, the old oak struck by lightning years ago, but he held back, unsure whether it would comfort or embarrass her. When they reached the ranch house, a sturdy two-story build of timber and sweat equity, Anna stepped down slow, boots crunching in the dirt, and she looked at the place, not with disappointment but with determination, like a woman who had come too far to be frightened by loneliness. And Caleb admired that more than he could rightly say, because out here strength meant survival, and survival meant partnership inside. The house was simple: wooden table scarred by years of meals eaten alone, iron stove polished clean, Bible resting near the window, though Caleb himself read it less often than he should. And Anna moved through the rooms quietly, touching chair backs, tracing window frames, learning the space the only way she knew how, by feel, by memory, by heart. And when she reached the bookshelf, her hand paused over the spines, fingers brushing titles she could not understand, and she quickly turned away, pretending to admire the curtains instead. That night, after supper eaten in gentle silence, Caleb found her sitting at the table with that same Bible open before her, eyes fixed hard on the page like she might will the letters into meaning, lips moving faint as if guessing at what they said. And something inside him shifted, not pity, not exactly, but a slow rising protectiveness mixed with admiration, because it took courage to face a page you could not read. And when she looked up at him, cheeks warm with embarrassment, he made a quiet promise to himself that before the first winter snow blanketed Silver Creek, Annabelle would know how to read every word her heart longed to understand. The first lesson began 3 nights after their wedding vows were spoken before the small congregation in Silver Creek, vows Anna had memorized, careful and exact, because she could not follow the preacher's open book. And when Caleb closed the ranch gate that evening and stepped inside, he found her seated at the kitchen table with a slate he'd bought from the mercantile, her fingers tracing its smooth surface like it might bite, and the oil lamp cast a golden circle of light between them. Warm and private as a whispered secret, Caleb cleared his throat and wrote a single letter on the slate, slow and deliberate, the chalk scratching soft against the dark stone, an A shaped like the roof of a barn, steady and proud. And he turned it toward her without a word, watching her eyes study the shape as though it were a new brand on a calf. something strange yet important, and when she reached out to copy it, her hand trembled, the lines uneven, the legs crooked, but there it stood, her first letter. Small and stubborn as she was again, he said gentle, not commanding but encouraging, and she tried once more, and then again, until the A stood straighter, and each time she managed it, he rewarded her not with applause but with a soft brush of his knuckles against her cheek, a quiet murmur of pride, and when she finally shaped it clean and sure, he leaned down and pressed a tender kiss to the corner of her mouth, a promise that learning could be sweet, not shameful. Word travels faster than wind in a town like Silver Creek, and before long, Mrs. Dobbins from the general store was whispering that Caleb Mercer's bride needed schooling like a child, and some of the ranch hands snickered when they heard he was teaching letters by lamplight, but Caleb paid no mind, because out on the range, a man learned quick that cattle didn't care for gossip, and neither did he, and Anna, for her part, pretended not to hear, though he saw the hurt flicker in her eyes when she passed folks on Sunday morning one evening. After weeks of tracing letters across slate and scrap paper, Caleb wrote something longer, slower this time, each stroke careful as a fence post set deep, ANNA, and he slid it toward her without speaking, and she stared at it a long moment, breaths shallow, because she recognized the first letter now, that barn roof A, but the rest stood strange and uncertain, and he guided her finger beneath each mark, sounding them out low, steady, until understanding dawned like sunrise over the prairie. When she realized what she was looking at, her own name written plain and proud before her, a sound escaped her throat that was half laugh and half sob, and she pressed her hand over her mouth, as if to keep it from spilling out too loud, because she had never before seen herself captured in ink, never seen proof that she existed beyond memory and voice, and she traced the letters again and again, whispering them soft as a prayer. Caleb watched her as though he were witnessing a miracle greater than rain after drought, and he bent close behind her, his chest warm against her back, guiding her hand as she wrote it herself for the first time, the chalk scraping careful but determined, ANNA, and when she finished, she turned in her chair, eyes shining brighter than the lamp flame, and he kissed her full and sure, tasting salt from tears and hope all at once that night, lying side by side beneath quilts stitched by her own hands. Anna confessed in a voice barely louder than the wind outside that her father had kept her home from school, saying girls needed obedience, not letters, and she had believed him until she grew old enough to feel the lack like an empty cupboard. And Caleb listened, quiet and steady, brushing hair from her brow, and he swore, not with anger but with resolve, that no child of theirs would ever face a page with fear. And as the prairie wind hummed low beyond the ranch house, their lessons became more than chalk and slate. They became a promise written not only on paper, but on two stubborn hearts. Learning together in the wide silence of the west winter came down hard on Silver Creek, snow settling thick along fence rails and drifting high against the barn doors, and inside the Mercer ranch house the lessons continued, steady as a heartbeat, Anna now shaping letters with growing confidence, her fingers no longer trembling when chalk met slate, and Caleb watched the change in her the way a rancher watches a field greening after frost, quiet pride filling his chest each time she sounded out a word. Without help, they moved from single letters to small words, then two sentences stitched together like pieces of quilt, and the first sentence she ever read aloud, clear and true, was written by Caleb in careful script. "You are my home," and though it was simple, it carried weight heavier than any cattle drive, and when she finished speaking it, her voice soft but certain, he tipped her chin up and kissed her, slow and lingering, as if sealing the meaning right there between them. The townsfolk still talked, but something had shifted, because Anna no longer lowered her gaze when handed a paper at the mercantile. She read the price signs herself now, slow but sure, and when Mrs. Dobbins tried to correct her change one afternoon, Anna counted it back with steady voice, numbers clear as church bells, and the woman's thin smile faltered. Foreknowledge had given Anna a spine as straight as any prairie oak on Sunday mornings. She no longer stared blank at the hymnal. Instead, her finger followed each line as the congregation sang, and the first time she read a verse from the Bible aloud in church, her voice trembled only at the start, then grew stronger with each word, and Caleb stood in the back pew listening, hat clutched tight against his chest, feeling a fierce swell of pride that no cattle sale or land deal had ever given him. One late evening, when the wind rattled the shutters and the fire burned low, Anna sat alone at the table, a sheet of paper before her, pen dipped careful in ink. and she began to write, not copied words, not guided strokes, but her own thoughts shaping themselves across the page, slow and deliberate. And Caleb watched from the doorway without interrupting, because this moment belonged to her. When she finished, she folded the paper with hands that no longer shook and passed it to him without a word, and he unfolded it careful, as if it were fragile glass, eyes scanning the lines she had written, each letter imperfect but proud, and it read, "Caleb, you gave me more than a home, you gave me words, and with them I found my voice, and though the grammar bent a little and the ink blotted in places, it was the most beautiful thing he had ever held." He looked up at her then, unable to speak for a long breath, because the girl who had once stood confused before a town sign now stood tall before him, educated not by schoolhouse bells but by patience and tenderness, by chalk, dust and lamplight, and kisses that made learning feel like love instead of shame. And he crossed the room in 2 long strides, lifting her clear off the floor as laughter bubbled from her chest that spring, when the snow melted and wildflowers scattered color across the prairie. A new sign was raised at the edge of Mercer Ranch, freshly painted and bold, and this time Anna read every letter of it aloud without hesitation, her smile bright as the morning sun, and Caleb kissed her right there beneath that wide western sky, knowing that, while cattle might wander and seasons might change, the greatest thing he had ever built was not a ranch or a reputation, but a woman's confidence restored one letter, one word, one kiss at a time.